Spot Shopper, back again. Yet another edition of Best Bets for Monday Night Football. And unfortunately, another edition of Denver Broncos on primetime television. This is not what the schedule makers had envisioned, I don't think. Before the season started, and you go, all right, we got Russ, we got Sutton, we got Judy, we got a good defense, we got a nice backfield, and a nice fresh head coach in Nathaniel Hackett. What a disaster this has been. But that's okay, because it's Monday Night Football. We're watching it, and the only way to watch a game like this, no question, is to bet it. So I got a side for you. I got a total. I got a prop. And as always, we'll throw a bonus anytime touchdown pick in there as well. So hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. It helps us greatly. Otherwise, I wouldn't ask you. Leave a comment down below. I try and read and respond to all of them. And follow me at Lofty_D on Twitter, LOUGHY_D. And in a few minutes, I'll tell you how to get $200 entirely without doing anything, essentially, over at BetMGM. So stick with me for that. Let's dive straight into this one. All right. I got to get comfortable for this because the Broncos, as you guys know, have not been good to me this year. Neither of the 5-1 New York Giants. Don't know what to make of them. We'll get into that next week. But with the Broncos, what do you say right now about a team that, and when I say they haven't been good to me, I'm talking about they've lost me money this year. I mean, last week, you remember Thursday Night Football, I laid the points on the Broncos, and they're up 9-6. 3rd and 6 inside the red zone with a great kicker in McManus. All they have to do is kick a field goal. The Colts had not moved the ball the entirety of that game. Matt Ryan looked horrible. Taylor was out. Nyheim Hines was out. Pittman couldn't get anything going. The offensive line couldn't block. You go up by 6 points against this team with a quarterback who's clearly not himself. You're good, right? The Colts need to drive all the way downfield to score a touchdown. What does Hackett do? He has Wilson throw it to the end zone, gets picked off. We lose outright. They didn't cut, not that they didn't cover, they didn't win the game. The Broncos fans left. The aisles were filled with guys leaving out to the concourse at the beginning of overtime. That's how bad this was. So forgive me at this point, as my buddy Ben says, who covered this video last week, you kind of have to manually override Denver right now. Like what you want to do, what you would assume the logic is, you have to go the opposite direction. Because I wouldn't be shocked if Hackett doesn't make it past tomorrow if they lose this game, right? But the problem is the game's too fast for him right now. The stage is too big for him. It's not about getting acclimated. He's making horrible decisions, unforced errors. Play calling has been terrible. This team has a 21% red zone efficiency. You know how bad that is? The next worst team is the Seahawks at 39%. That's how bad Denver's been in the red zone. Whether it's fumbles, whether it's interceptions, whether it's trash play calling. Maybe they figure this out, right? But there's nothing to suggest right now that they have figured it out. We're 6 weeks almost into the season. There's nothing to suggest that they have figured things out. And Russell Wilson now has a partially torn lat near his throwing shoulder. He said he's feeling better, but who knows what that means. He was completely off last game. I still blame most of that on Hackett. They should have had the win. Nothing looks good for them right now. You can't get the ball to Judy. Sutton's been pretty good. He's been the only reliable source of production on this team lately, but their defense is good, right? That's the thing about Denver. They've been a surefire recipe for unders this season because their defense is the only thing that's keeping them competitive and in games. Think about this. Outside of the game against the Raiders, where they uncharacteristically gave up a ton of yards on the ground, the totals between in games that the Broncos have played, the actual final score totals, 21, 21, 25, and 33. Really, really low scoring games. And then you've got the Chargers. Keenan Allen is doubtful to play today. And you have Mike Williams, who's probably going to spend a lot of time against Pat Surtain, who's absolutely incredible. Sure, Eckler's awesome. I expect the Chargers to win this game. But the Broncos defense is good enough to at least keep things in check long enough to keep this game from soaring over the 45.5 point total. And you might be saying, yeah, but Laffy, the Broncos or the Chargers defense has been terrible. They have not been good. And we will get to a prop on that in a second. But the Broncos offense is so bad in the red zone, and even getting to the red zone has been a tall task in and of itself, that I don't see them being able to really exploit that. If this game shoots out, so be it. But as it stands right now, I look at two teams. I go, one clearly has a better offense, right, in the Chargers. Clearly, they're still functioning better, even though Staley makes some questionable decisions in his own right. Broncos have a good defense. I still expect the Chargers to outscore the Broncos because Denver's offense has been completely anemic. And the play calling is the worst that we've seen. Again, I'm not sure if Hackett is still the coach.
Welcome in. It is the No House Advantage Monday Night Football Edition strategy show as we'll get you ready to win some money, cash a ticket or two for No House Advantage. Tonight, it's myself and Geoff. Mike's in the house producing. You out there, just hit the thumbs up button, please, if you haven't already, so you can be a part of what we're doing. Subscribe, of course, across the board. Multiple channels for you to mix and match and subscribe. Make sure that you're doing what we're doing here. All right, my friend, Monday Night Football, and it can't be worse than Thursday Night Football. We do have at least one team in the LA Chargers who looks somewhat competent on offense. No Keenan Allen, so we'll deal with that coming up. But you also have on the other side the Denver Broncos, Nathaniel Hackett. You know, if it weren't for Staley over there on the Chargers sideline, Geoff, I'd say that we have a clear-cut example of one bozo going up against a non-bozo, but Staley is doing everything he can to be a bozo as well.
Yeah, man. No, it's true. Like, and they're the Chargers, right? Like the Chargers will do Charger things. So, yes. I mean, yeah, that's the problem. We're putting our faith in the Chargers to make this like an exciting game, which they can make it exciting just in weird ways, right? So I don't know. I mean, the Broncos defense, I think, has had a lot to do with just the Broncos playing some ugly games. And that's going to be something that like the Chargers have to overcome. I mean, they're playing a good defense. So we could get another one. We could get another slogfest, man, where it's, there's not much offense. There's not much moving the ball and we got a close game, but at the very least, you got to figure there's a chance that like Justin Herbert comes to play. Maybe Russell Wilson puts the injury behind him and jumps out quick. And we get a little bit of good football game, but I'm not getting my hopes too high. Some injury concerns with Keenan Allen being out could hamper the Chargers as well. It is interesting though, like the Broncos getting some players back. One of them is on defense. And then the other one is Greg Dulcich, who's looks like he's going to play, could give them a boost, but it's the Broncos, man. Anything could happen here.
It really is. And I think there are a couple of game scripts you can look at that may correlate as far as, how we're looking at our projections, which are free up on Stokastic. We also have the optimal lineup, which is essentially just the plug and play. So you have everything top down 7 all the way through the 1-pointers there. But you're right. I mean, the Broncos could be lighting it up and fumble it away, in this case, literally with Melvin Gordon. You never know how this thing can play out. So where are your parameters, right? Like if you look at this Denver team and think, well, yeah, they could easily put up 9 points. I get that. I don't know. It's hard for me to think that they're surviving a shootout against the Chargers. I don't know how they get to their portion of holding up their bargain in a shootout. So I don't know. Their teams have played well on the road. The under has played well to both of these two teams consistently. So how do you see this game in your mind playing out? Then we can kind of look individually.
Yeah. So I think you're right about them like not surviving a shootout necessarily, the Broncos, just in terms of points. But one thing about the Chargers that like they're defensively, they give up a lot of yards, just total yards. Like, whether it's on the ground, which they have not been good at defending against, they're, in terms of yards per carry and just total yards allowed, they're bottom 3. And through the air too. I mean, yards per play, like yards per pass attempt against, This is a team that'll give up big plays. They have been like pretty good at like, around the red zone. And that is obviously the Broncos' Achilles heel. But
right.
I think when you're looking for props, like taking the over on some of these Denver players, and it's interesting with no house. I mean, they've actually set the Broncos players quite reasonable or even low in terms of their over-unders. So I do think the Broncos are going to move the ball. I mean, I'm not as you. I'm not confident in saying like they can survive a shootout, but if the Broncos do move the ball, that could also jack up some of like Herbert's numbers as well. So there's definitely a way I'm looking at playing this game. And I think it kind of starts with Russell Wilson, and we haven't projected for going over his prop. It's 230.5. It's pretty low. I know Russ has been terrible, but like that's a pretty low prop for a guy with a legit number one alpha receiver in Courtland Sutton going up against the secondary that's allowed big yards and just really hasn't been that good at limiting big plays. I think that going over Russ to start lineups, as ugly as it sounds and as ugly as it was the last time we saw him, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's the bigger thing. Now, there was talk earlier in the week about the shoulder, right? Playing through the shoulder injury, which, funny as it may be, Geoff, was not on the injury report the last 4 weeks, right? But now all of a sudden, so yeah, I feel like there are a couple of things working either for or against Russell Wilson. And the biggest concern that I always have is Nathaniel Hackett, right? It's the guy that's with him. It's not necessarily Wilson. But yeah, I agree with what you mentioned, our projections as well, going over, even if it's that slight to go over passing yards. The bet that we put out earlier on the Odd Shopper channel, and it's one that Odd Shopper loves, is him going over 19.5 completions. And I think that correlates beautifully with here on NHA going over the passing yards. And, even if you just look at the game that he'll have to have, at some point, he's going to have to be willing his team, right? Like even if it's any time, like even if it's tucking or doing whatever, at some point, Russell Wilson's just going to have to say, all right, enough of this Nathaniel Hackett shit. I need to take over. We hope he's able to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, like it's the injury thing with Russ is so weird too. Cause like it came out, but it's like, he's already, I do think he was legitimately playing with it. I mean, that makes a lot of sense that the last 2, maybe even 3 weeks, he was playing with an injury. Yep. But to your point about the news, like it's already come out and saying like he's feeling better. So I think there's actually, like, if you're looking at these two teams, I think the Broncos actually have a lot of things like going their way coming into this game. They got a defensive player back in Justin Simmons, which could just lead to, again, them getting the ball a little bit more than we project. Dulcich is back, so that's another passing option. The receivers are healthy. So I don't know. Like I like this one. I mean, I think the line is too low on no house. I feel pretty good about it going over. And, to that point, that kind of moves to the second play, which is we've got Courtland Sutton at 70.5 receiving yards and 5.5 receptions. These are pretty big props. I'm not going to lie, bigger than across the industry. We haven't projected for about neutral, but like if I'm going over on Russell Wilson, I got to drag at least one of his receivers over with me. And like Jerry Jeudy is fine, but he's may lose a little targets. Hamler's back in there as well. I think just taking Sutton on the over to pair with him in your lineups with Wilson makes sense.
Yeah, seriously. You're going to have to choose really one or the other. Right. And
I think so tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way that you can, I mean, I guess you could double stack, right, and just go over and really put, but that's back to the whole shootout. And that's where I think you kind of have to draw either your line or just set your parameters and say, yeah. And I love the strategy where it's Russell Wilson goes over, one guy pushes him over, but I think you start to get into trouble when you put both Sutton and Jeudy in that conversation. If it's one or the other, that's the conversation. But when you put both of them in there, that's when you can get burned.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because like, let's not forget, I mean, the Chargers give up a lot of yards on the ground too. I would agree. Like, I think a double stack here is asking too much. Obviously anything could happen. Jeudy could go for a 60-yard catch and run and get there on like 2 targets or something, but I think it's asking too much as well. I like just rolling with Sutton. We know the volume's there. He's got a 28% team target share. And the Broncos, Melvin Gordon may be questionable, but they bring up Latavius Murray, who's going to be in the game apparently. So you know that they have an eye here to be running the ball early. Mike Boone is still capable as well. They'll run the ball like the Broncos. That's what they do. They're not bad at doing it, even with like their backups. So, yeah, I think dragging 2 receivers with Wilson, that's again, like maybe if you're making 20 lineups, you do that in like 1 or something, but it's not something I'd be going overboard with.
Now, are you looking at it to where if you are going over Judy, you go under Sutton and then vice versa? Or is it just a stay away where it's like, hey, you're only going to take a risk on one guy and the other would just be a pass?
I mean, like, again, we go back to our projections on Stokastic, and these are free. Yep. But we do have Judy projected as a decent under. I mean, like, I think that going over on Sutton and then under on Judy is perfectly fine. I think that I would probably be a little bit hesitant to do the other route because I just like Sutton is going to get targets. It just seems very unrealistic to think that like all of a sudden the targeting is just going to flow all to Jerry Jeudy in the game. We've had opportunities for that to happen in better matchups and it hasn't happened. So I think I'd be more like, I think if Jeudy gets there, it's like 4 targets. He caught like a 30-yard or a 40-yard pass and he kind of just got there like that. Whereas Sutton, I mean, if he doesn't get there, it's because like the Chargers play a little bit better. They limit him to just like 10-yard catches or something. And he hits like 60 or something. But yeah, I would be more prone to going under on Jeudy, and over on Sutton than going the other way.
Yeah. On the other side of this, just to look at Herbert, because we talked about Russell Wilson and it's going to expand and then we'll get back really. Actually, you know what, real quick, before we do that, let's just stay here because the biggest play we have is Melvin Gordon under 79.2. And every time Gordon comes up and every time his under pops, we have to add the caveat, which is this dude could easily put the ball on the carpet at the wrong time and lose a significant amount of his carry share, right? So that's something that you do it now. It's a secondary thing. It's not the primary reason, but clearly Russell Wilson going over his passing yards, Wilson throwing, the need for Russell Wilson to throw is going to hurt Melvin Gordon getting to 59 rushing yards. Yeah.
And this one is interesting. Like you think about this game, you think Melvin Gordon's the lead back and it's the Chargers defense and 58, it sounds low. Like Melvin Gordon, he definitely puts the ball on the ground too much. He kind of stinks, but like he's also still a pretty effective runner between tackles. And the Broncos run the ball well. Like they're still a good run team. But like this comes down to the coach and the setup. This is really a Nathaniel Hackett thing. He literally picked up a guy off the street and is going to insert him in the rotation this week. He specifically said he wants a rotation. He wants fresher guys touching the ball. So even if Melvin Gordon starts the game hot, like there's no guarantee that he sees 15 plus carries. Could easily top out at 12 carries. And you could be stuck on like 55, even with like a good game or something. He could average 5 yards per carry and get like 10 carries. Then you add in the injury news, the fact Melvin Gordon has a severe case of fumbleitis, and this total all of a sudden like looks a lot bigger. So I roll with the under. I think that Melvin Gordon though is a good contrarian play. Like if you're, and we talked about like going over on the passing yards with the receivers. If I was to take one play where I would go, okay, I'm going to go against the field and I'm going to start with this dude, it would actually be Melvin Gordon's over, because I think the matchup is really good. And I think there are paths for him to get there. Murray could only take 5 snaps. That's the other thing. Like he did just get picked up off the street. And if you start with Melvin Gordon over, that actually leads nicely to like Justin Herbert's overs, right? On the other side of the game. So it's an interesting play, but yeah, for a one-off, like I mean, it's a big total and we have him under for a reason.
Man, this thing here, just looking at anybody else that you could just confidently get to on this team. I mean, I don't even know. Do we even have anybody else? I think that's it for the Broncos.
No,
right?
Yeah, I mean, like we don't even get a Hamler prop.
No,
there's only one running back. We're basically left with like 4 players. No, is it 4 players?
It's Wilson, the 2 wideouts, and Gordon.
Yeah. So, and we do have a Wilson passing touchdown prop. That one's interesting. I mean, it's what 1.5. We basically haven't projected for neutral, but again, like if you're like, I would rather take the Wilson over passing touchdown props than taking Wilson with both his receivers to go over, if that makes sense to people. I think like Russ is still, I mean, in his heyday, he's a very efficient quarterback. If he starts to show flash of that again, like he can go for like 240 and like throw 2 passing touchdowns and like 25 pass attempts or 28 pass attempts. So that's an interesting one too. But again, it's not a must play. But yeah, we just don't have many Bronco props to talk about.
All right, so let's look at this real quick. We'll get over to the Chargers in a minute. We'll remind everybody beyond, of course, hitting the thumbs up button, subscribing to the Stokastic and Beyond community here. We've got a network of channels here for you. You can jump on No House Advantage if you haven't already. We'll match your first deposit up to $50. Just use our promo code Stokastic. Let's look at think about it. The easiest answer here would be to go over Melvin Gordon's. If you're building multiple lineups, then put Melvin Gordon over rushing yards, right? At 7 points, Geoff. That would be the easiest contrarian play because he stands out. But is there another one? We talk about it as far as just finding a good contrarian play. Yeah, you could go against the field with Russell Wilson passing yards, but I don't think that makes a lot. Like, I like really where the over is there. I don't know if maybe it's back to what we were talking about, where the contrarian play would be to go over receiving yards for Judy and then under for Sutton.
Yeah, or over on Gordon and then under on Sutton as well. Right? Yeah. Like I think actually going over on either of those players and then taking an under with Sutton, it makes sense. I mean, again, like I'm not bullish on a Jerry Judy breakout game, but it could happen. I mean, it's definitely at least something that, maybe that, again, the Chargers do allow, like big plays, like they allow broken plays that they could just come in and Jerry Judy could end up against linebackers a lot tonight or something. So they could decide to try and double team Cortland Sutton and that wouldn't surprise me. So yeah, I think that both those plays actually make sense. I think that the Sutton under is like the other thing that you would pair with, again, if you're going to take a stance on Judy or Gordon, that to me definitely sticks out. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. Especially when you can try and find something that correlates, that makes sense. All right, let's flip on the other side here. It's narrow, but Justin Herbert, we do have him over passing touchdowns. That's really, and Eckler as well, going under his rushing yards. So if the game flow is any indication here as far as our own projections, it would be Herbert throwing the ball and Eckler doing stuff, but probably not as much on the ground.
Yeah, and the Eckler one is interesting too. Like I think a lot of people will either not want to fade Austin Eckler or just leave him out because he's just coming off a great game. You've got the aura that the Broncos stink, and their rush defense isn't the best part of their defense. But at the same time, it's a pretty solid defense. My problem with Eckler and taking an over on him is, like, we're topping out at 15 or 16 carries. He got 16 carries against the Browns last week. And like, that was with the Chargers. Pretty sure they were ahead like the whole game. So like, that's his ceiling, 16 carries, in my opinion. You saw Josh Kelly coming in, taking early down work. I think there's a good chance that, and that, the Broncos just play a little bit better at the start of the game. They start fast, a massive game for them. They get it. They're back in the division. And it just forces Eckler into more of a receiving role and more of just like a scat back role where he's getting, probably 8 or 10 carries, maybe some from the shotgun or something, but that's it. And you're going to have a real hard time, even if he's averaging like 5 yards per carry, kind of like my Melvin Gordon argument. So like, I like Eckler as a player. He's great. And this prop probably seems low to a lot of people, but I get why we have him under. And I think we have him under for the simple fact he's just not a high volume running back. He's never going to be. He was in the perfect spot last week to take 20 plus carries, and the Chargers just didn't do it. They have 2 guys. Sony Michel's still a thing. They're going to mix those guys in. They don't want to wear Eckler down. Makes sense. I think the under here is fine. I don't really have any reason to want to take the over unless you're just creating like a massive Charger stack where they're just, everybody's getting a bunch of yards and they're going to win like 35-10 or something, which, I mean, fine. Like that's an outcome that could happen, but I like the Eckler under. I think it's a good way to start too for the Chargers.
And that's really the only thing you can play for him, because without Keenan
we don't
Allen,
have receiving yards.
Exactly. I mean, receiving yards, receptions, especially without Keenan Allen. We'll get to Gerald Everett, who could probably benefit again. Yeah. I mean, maybe Josh Palmer, but that would be the easy correlation, right? Which is, it's almost too easy at that point. You think, all right, well, that's why NHA doesn't have it in there. I know we're winding down, a couple of minutes here to go. Let's just look at this real quick. Final 4 or 5 minutes, Geoff. On the other side of that, we talked about the Broncos. Now it is other guys outside of Herbert. Mike Williams clearly without Keenan Allen. So we go over his receptions 4-5. The projection we have just nearly over that. And then Gerald Everett, I get it. Like it's a tight number, but I'm a little surprised that we're not over his receiving yards and we are over his receptions, but not by much. I would just think he would be an easy target now without a guy like just as far as volume without Keenan Allen out there.
Yeah. The Chargers are annoying for fantasy right now because no one's really stepped up and been like that presence without Keenan Allen. Like it's just kind of like the Vladimir Lenin approach, like everybody getting a piece of bread here, like Josh Palmer had a couple weeks where he had like 5 catches and then he had nothing. Everett's probably been the most consistent player. And I kind of agree with you. Like it seems a little bit low, but at the same time, like he's the tight end and he's been pretty good with Herbert. Like his yards per catch have been there, but we haven't really seen him pop where to the point where it's been like, okay, like he can clearly step up and be the second option. Maybe tonight is the game where that finally happens, but Palmer's still going to be worked in there. Everett's only play, like his snap count actually went down a little bit. Again, another concern, but I'm with you. Like I think that if you're leaning here, it's really tight. And I think these projections, like again, if you're asking me like if I got to pick one side, I'm only betting the Gerald Everett prop.
Right.
I would probably lean under, but like we're talking no house advantage. We want to correlate things. Like if I'm taking Russell Wilson to throw some passing yards up, I expect that, Everett could just be like the Chargers just won't be running the ball as much. And there'll just be an extra target there. And I think using Everett on the other side again, to go over is fine because the other thing here is like Mike Williams against the Broncos has not been good. He had 5 catches in 2 regular season games against them last year. And like some of that is just Mike Williams being like a ghost at times, but like the other part of that is just, this is a very good secondary, especially against outside wide receivers. Patrick Surtain's really good. And it would not shock me if Mike Williams had a slow night. So I think the Everett, again, all things to me, like it just won't shock me if Everett ends up being like a pretty easy over when this is all said and done, potentially, with 50 yards or more. So
is there, all right, so where is the contrarian angle then? I mean, would it just be slamming somebody like Palmer going over?
Yeah. Like again, like I think that the Mike Williams props, again, like we have him over, but these aren't strong overs.
No. And you mentioned the history, which I think is key here.
Like 4.5 receptions for Mike Williams. People are going to look at that and be like, what is like, this is so low. Of course we're taking the over, but we only have him projected for like 4.8, 4.9. And then his yards the same, 66.5. He's put up a couple 100-yard games. Oh, he's the number one option in the offense. Of course, like we're going over, but we only have him projected for like 2 yards more than his prop. So these are really tight. And yeah, like I think that going over Everett and then under Williams is probably, it's an interesting play. I really think that is a valid way to do it. And let's not forget, like Eckler can get worked in. They have other tight ends who see some targets at times. They have a couple deep guys who could just eat up yards. So all in all, yeah, Chargers are interesting, really tight props. We don't have like huge leans on any of the Charger players. I think our biggest lean is just the Eckler under, but even that is, we're talking about like a 4-yard spread. So
yeah.
I mean, I think that the Chargers are more of like a mix and match team. Like it's definitely less leans here on anything. I do think like Herbert over the passing touchdown prop. I think that's fine. Herbert's just good. He's averaged 2.5 passing touchdowns this year. I know it's a good passing defense he's going against, but like it's Justin Herbert. Like I don't think he's going to put up a dud with like, 9 points in a primetime game. He'll probably get there. So we have that projected as an over too. It's not a strong over, but I do like the over on Herbert passing touchdowns. And I probably like it more than the yards, to be honest. So
it's a tough one tonight. And you do have that wrinkle of Herbert, the Chargers, the ability to score. It's not like Thursday night, and it's not like you go into it thinking, or the last time we saw the Broncos, my God. All right, so that's pretty much it. Anything else? We got a jet. We've got a lot more content here on the channel. You and I need to make way for some other folks here. All right.
Let's do it. Have a good one, guys. And like I said, I mean, I guess we're putting our trust in Wilson to do something tonight. We'll see how that goes. We'll back
see. And
Thursday.
Herbert, I guess, to a lesser extent, yes. But the trust factor as far as like being concerned. All right, E-Mac and Terry coming your way in 5 minutes for the NHA NBA edition. Right. Geoff, Thursday, we're all back here for the rest of the week. See y'all.